街の明かりがぼやけてる理解できぬ何も見えぬ
Hey, I'm Christian Highland, and you're listening to episode 2 of the AI Hype podcast. With me, I have Phil Warthen, fellow AI podcast host wannabe. We're super excited today to talk about the voice AI space.
Phil, fellow podcast bro wannabe over here. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense for us to have this episode because like Christian and I are constantly, investigating the space and learning about, not just how to build it, but how other people are building stuff and why other people are building stuff, and kind of the viewpoint that are a lot of these startups are taking when they're building. Like, how do they think people will be using AI voice? So it'll be a good conversation.
I also want to note, as a jumping off point for today, we're using a report prepared by a16z's by Olivia Moore. So thank you for this. It's a great report. The voice agent market exploded in the second quarter of 2024. Just looking through this report, they represented 22% of the most recent Y Combinator class, and they're expanding into a whole bunch of verticals. But really, a lot of that explosion is spurred by a lot of great advancements and tooling available in the voice space, the voice AI space.
What's new in AI is kind of exciting. Over the past 2 years, there have been some like enormous changes and updates to what's occurring as far as voice AI is concerned. But you really got to start at the original LLM models, right? Where OpenAI is kind of making these like revolutionary changes to their models that are available to the public. And one of them was for Omni back in May 2024. And when they released that, they added the real-time API capabilities. And then from there, it was just like the race had started with everybody trying to release their own speech-to-speech or real-time like capabilities to have enhanced speech conversations. So, OpenAI releases for Omni back in May 2024. Then they release what they call the advanced voice features in July. And then there was the cool one, the Notebook LM. I don't know, Christian, if you remember that one. That has some good stories we can dive into later. And then there's a couple other major technologies that make it cheaper. And that's the crazy thing is, between May and September, we start to see the cost of voice AI drop enormous drops. And along with PlayHT, you had 11 Labs. NVIDIA, 11 Labs launches their conversational AI. NVIDIA launches their Fugato model. And so it just becomes this really cool, like, rapid development in the span of like a single year. We go from the Omni versions from OpenAI to basically all the competitors having similar features or similar models that basically drive down the cost of AI, voice AI, a race to the bottom. It's crazy to see because, like, I think as from an outside perspective, I would think that voice would be like the most expensive thing to do. And it is. It still remains the most expensive part of AI. But like watching how fast it drops to zero is crazy. Small tangent, Christian, is like there's a lot of predictions that AI is going to be everywhere and it's going to be dirt cheap to run. And that's just going to be such a transformational thing where, it costs billions of dollars to develop the models, but then once they're developed and once the competition has the latest as well, then it's just like it drops to near zero, and it'll be able to run on your phones. Like it's such a cool future that we're trending towards. And so, back when OpenAI releases their original thing, and we basically have this like infrastructure stack where there's the application layer, and then there's like NLP, which includes like the text to speech and the LLM and speech to text, and we have to deal with streaming and telephony. The cool thing now today is what OpenAI released with that voice to voice, where now we're able to replace the conversational part, the emotional part, and text to speech, LLM, speech to text. All of that, those 5 pieces are brought into a single voice to voice model. And from the outside, maybe that doesn't mean a lot, but from like a software development perspective, like those 5, building on top of those 5 pieces was like a huge effort for us, specifically. And then moving to a voice to voice just reduced the amount of engineering effort that we had to go through to create a new feature. Like it brought it to near zero for those portions. And now we just have to focus on one API to build on top of it. It's wild how much more efficient it is right now.
Yeah, and I think going back to your point about sort of AI becoming the LLMs becoming dirt cheap, and the wrappers being sort of where the value is, it really reminds me a lot. I used to be in the telecom space, and if you look at the market cap of all the major wireless carriers, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, if you take their whole market cap, it's less than like a Facebook, right? So the net natives are the ones that benefit off the internet versus the ones who actually built the entire infrastructure for us to have, high-speed internet nationally. And I think you're going to see a lot of the same sort of similar mechanics or similar effects in the AI space.
All right, to that point, Christian, like looking at the a16z report and seeing how 20% of the YC startups are AI startups, and you look at like who are those startups that are included, there's so much. There's basically 2 strategies: the horizontal strategy and the vertical strategy. The horizontal strategy being like, we're going to build an AI voice tool that can serve any industry, right? It's agnostic. It doesn't care what industry you're in. And then there's the vertical one, which is kind of like what we're doing over at First Wave, where we are diving deep with integrations on the back end. So you focus on one industry and you build the entire tool so that it hyper focuses and serves that single industry to make it easier for adoption. And I think that's going to be the big play here is, which model is going to pan out in the long term, which is going to have more value to businesses and consumers. Is it going to be the one that's available to everybody, that everybody can build very easily off of the platform that these startups are making, or is it the one where the integration is deep and layered into the back end so that it's the easiest conversion, it's the easiest adoption for that specific industry. So it'll be really, really interesting to see how this plays out in the long term.
Going back to that a16z report, Y Combinator founders are building voice AI agents, largely focused on B2B, so about 69% there. Healthcare focused, another 18%, followed by consumer, 13%, and you're talking, industries across fintech, ops, medical, education tech, hospitality, sales, logistics. I mean, that could go on. Looking through that report, sort of, it has like a, one of those tables that shows the different players in different sectors, like recruiting, restaurants, home services, training. But to be honest, I've probably heard about a dozen other voice AI companies that aren't on this list that are covering different verticals. So everything from our friend Mehdi, who's building a voice AI focused on car washes. I've seen voice AIs in the laundromat space. I mean, I've seen voice AI products being built everywhere. transparently, I think what you're going to see is folks that have good contacts in various industries might look to leverage them with a voice AI. I think we're just at a stage where there's going to be an explosion in voice AI products looking to serve every single vertical across the US, especially, I think we're going to see a big adoption early on in SMBs, but I think only, in a few years, sort of the cream will rise to the top. So, there'll be certain companies that survive and those that don't. Some conversations I've had and why I think SMBs in particular are going to have sort of that initial adoption first is I was talking to sort of prospects on the West Coast, and if you look at like Seattle, they have a $25 minimum wage, right? A $25 minimum wage. So folks that are answering the phone as for a small venue, like let's say a place that employs 10 people, that 11th person might be the difference between a profitable location and a location that's in the red. So these voice AIs are going to just become ubiquitous across, beginning with sort of early adopters, so SMBs, logistics, maybe debt collection, but moving up the chain into enterprise. I think these are just going to explode this year and next year to the point where they're just a natural part of our life.
Yeah, to your point about like the startups that are going to survive and like the cream is going to rise to the top, I think it's really going to be dependent on the startups that are able to not only build a great product, but build a great business model behind it to support that product. And a16z, they have like a really good breakdown of what they think the ideal voice AI company will look like, right? And it's kind of in line with how we've been building over at First Wave. So essentially, they're looking for an industry where the phone is, the preferred medium for interacting with that business. And I don't know about you, but like, there's a lot of businesses that I don't call, right? Like, there's no reason for me to ever call that business. But there's other businesses where I just want to call and get the answer quickly over the phone. So it very much depends on the specific business and the specific industry. But then the a16z also highlights like, hey, there's also like regulation and like laws that also kind of shape which industries are going to be more attractive than others. And so wherever making voice calls makes sense from like the customer perspective and then the legal perspective, that's going to be ideal, right? And then another part is, you want to be able to have a call where the conversation is, constrained, or it falls within a certain parameter. Like, you're not calling to talk about the NBA and then talk about, a hotel reservation and then talk about the weather. That's not something that, AI will handle very well. But if it's all within one specific industry use case, like, that's going to perform way better and the customer is going to be much happier. I think another aspect is like, when you're having AI handle whatever voice interactions, you're basically trying to reduce the expenses on the business, right? Because answering phones and having conversations takes a lot of time, and time can be expensive. Like you're talking about Seattle, like it can cost $25 an hour. And so essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to come in with a voice product that is, one, more efficient at handling those calls, and then two, is cheaper. So if a human takes 5 minutes to have a conversation, but an AI can do it in 30 seconds, not only is it 10 times faster and more efficient, but there's also the cost factor, because maybe the cost is, per minute, it's half the cost. And so now you're seeing like a 20 times increase in reduction in expenses. So like that's an ideal thing that a16z is calling out for business model purposes. Like AI can really help drive those down. There's some other aspects that a16z is looking at. They're looking at like life or death calls where people will pay a lot of money to get all these calls answered. That could be like 911 emergency calls kind of a thing. I didn't see many startups in that section yet, but I think a lot of startups are trying to avoid these high mistake kind of interactions because people don't want to be liable for mishandling a emergency life or death situation where people will pay a lot of money for it, but if you get it wrong, like that could be incredibly bad. The risk is way too high. Another thing that we're looking at First Wave is, having these calls not only just handle the specific interaction, but there's also an opportunity to like cross-sell or upsell on the phone. So a16z is like really zooming in on that, where, if it's not just the expense reduction from like being able to handle calls more efficiently or more quickly, but also being able to drive revenue, like that's a huge game changer. Because I don't know about you, Christian, but like sometimes you call in to some place and the person on the phone doesn't really care, and they take a really long time to like resolve your issue, and maybe there was something else that you were interested but you just forgot, and that's like an opportunity for that business to have made a extra revenue. The AI handles it so well. Like we've got a feature where it basically pushes for cross-selling or upselling based off of assumed interest in these other products, and it's so cool to see it in real life where the AI is kind of like guiding you towards making additional purchases that are relevant to the customer. Like the customer does want these things. It's just not top of mind on that specific phone call, and it kind of like helps them push them along. So it's such a cool thing to see like live in person.
And so another like key areas, essentially in that same a16z report, they have sort of an adoption curve, and looking at sort of the innovator section, it's sort of all the things we touched on. So you have SMB, especially appointment bookings for small businesses. We're seeing a lot of demand for that as well. Obviously, call center services, but outbound sales, right? You're seeing a lot of startups pop up around outbound sales. I think a lot of these are cold calling type startups, which is its own sort of can of worms that we can jump into. But there is a lot of opportunity with outbound sales with a place that wants to interact with a customer base and encourage more purchases, but not necessarily have it be a cold call. So, for example, take a pet hair salon, right? They might have customers that come in and they want to follow up with them to encourage them to come back, see how their service was, but really drive repeat customers and reduce churn. So in terms of outbound, that's an opportunity there. Sort of in the innovator space, you're also seeing restaurant orders going on to early adopters. You're seeing it in logistics, drive-through, back office healthcare, debt collection, training, and sort of high volume recruiting. There was actually a whole post on sort of how AI is taking on sort of that initial interview with places that have to interview so many people.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really cool application is the interview space. Like to be interviewed by a robot would be such a wild thing. I bet it's like very adaptive, because when you extrapolate it, like, can you imagine a world where almost everything that you're doing is initially through a robot, and then there's this like layer of robots that you have to work through in the beginning before you can speak to a human? It's almost like a screener, in effect. Is we're putting this layer of AI as a screen between people to kind of filter the sheer amount of people that are trying to have conversations. So it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out in the long term.
I think we're going to a place where not just businesses will have AI, but me as a person might have a voice AI that handles inbound calls or can make outbound calls for me to these places, right? So maybe it's not just your veterinarian checking in on Fluffy or seeing if you want to come in for that 8-month vaccine. It's your AI calling to the place that you want to get a reservation, a booking, an appointment scheduled. I could even see it, when my mother was sick, we had to spend a lot of time on the phone with insurers and making sure things were covered and this and that. And I could see our AI, having an AI that makes that call for you. There's probably an AI on the other end, and it's doing that sort of negotiation on your behalf. There's some definitely societal considerations on this and some big changes that are coming to humanity. But I think if cost of running these voice AIs is going where it seems it's going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be something that everybody has.
Yeah. So you actually just gave me a really good idea about what the future of AI is going to look like. Where in the immediate future, before AI, is adopted universally, right? Like, it'd be so cool if I could pass off my customer service calls to an AI bot, have it do the call, try to like work towards a resolution. And then even when the businesses adopt AI, it'll be so weird where, Philip as the consumer starts his AI bot and sends it to a call center to get some kind of resolution or some kind of like end result. And then my AI talks with their AI and they have an AI conversation back and forth to like resolve the thing. Like, that'll be so cool. I bet that's like right around the corner. That's probably like an Apple product coming down the line somewhere.
I think, Phil, it'd be great to kind of dive in and give a super high level of a couple players in the space, maybe 3. We can use another episode to go into depth into other voice AI startups and test out their products, but I think it'd be good to dive into a couple. The first one is Loman.ai. This is an AI phone agent really tailored to restaurants. So it can handle things like order taking, reservations, customer inquiries. Didn't find any specific information around fundraising activity yet or revenue, but again, interesting vertical. Another player is Numa. So Numa is an AI phone agent, really focused on car dealerships. So it's handling things like managing customer inquiries, scheduling service appointments, and providing information on vehicles and services. So again, on Numa specifically, I think we've all had that experience where we called into a car dealership and it felt hectic. You could feel the hecticness of the facility as if the person answering your phone needs to run to a customer at that moment to try to close the sale. So that definitely seems like a great vertical. Congrats to them for sort of being in that space. And clearly other people think it's a great vertical. They secured $32 million in a Series B funding round, with Mitsui being one of their investors. Another kind of startup that we've seen and are curious about is Hello Patient. So Hello Patient, it's essentially a generative AI phone agent, and it handles sort of the questions that a support staff or front desk staff might handle. So it can do things like manage patient appointments, scheduling, and even reminders for patients. And it's there to sort of answer questions, for people to call in. I don't know about you, but I remember, I had my first son during COVID, and it was so difficult to get an appointment or to get a hold of a doctor's office. I just remember the voice, kind of the voice recording. I'd call into this doctor's office, and it seemed like the voice recording was done by someone on their phone in a bathroom. I mean, terrible acoustics, unhelpful, kind of obnoxious, and then you just be on hold forever. And to be able to have an AI that can get with you on the phone, schedule appointments, know the difference between like a routine appointment versus, hey, my son has like 102, 103, 104-degree fever, like I want to see someone now, or be able to answer questions on the doctor's office, right? I mean, how many of those calls that are preventing you from getting a hold of someone are actually completely routine questions. So questions about, hey, what are your hours? Hey, what are your specialties? Do you take this insurance, that insurance? Like, you eliminate even those useless questions or those easy questions, you're freeing up your staff to really deal with the most critical stuff and the most high value stuff, and you're really delivering a better patient experience.
And each of these startups that you're talking about are focused on providing such specific help with each of those vertical industry verticals that, like, I just can't wait to have like wider adoption for each of these. I'm so excited for the way the whole industry is kind of evolving.
In terms of the future, where do you see this going, Phil?
I think in the future, AI is going to be everywhere. It's going to be like in everything in your house. It's going to be the first layer that you interact with for everything. AI is going to get so cheap and so efficient. It's going to run on the smallest computer devices. That could be on your phone. That could be, out into your refrigerator, your dishwasher, your microwave. Like, it'll be everywhere. And voice AI is going to be just the natural thing. Instead of like whipping out your phone to, do something, you'll be able to just talk, kind of like the smart speakers, the Alexas, the Apple had their Siri smart speakers. I think this is like the realization of the dream that they had with the smart speaker setup, where you just kind of like walk around your house, you talk to the computer, and then it's able to do the thing for you. And even beyond that, it's going to be able to handle all the business conversations. So we're basically putting that first layer of AI into our daily lives. To we'll have a 20-second conversation with AI, and it'll go and do the hard leg work. Valentine's Day is coming up. AI will already know my preferences. It'll know the types of restaurants I like, either the ones that I visited already or the ones that I haven't visited. And it'll be able to, I'll have a 20-second thing. I'll say like, hey, make a reservation for me and my wife for Valentine's Day. And it'll be able to pull up 10 different restaurants, call around, find the availability, and then match it against my calendar. And then go ahead and make the appointment. And that's going to be just so wild, where I just had 20-second conversation, and this did probably like 30 minutes of legwork for me instantaneously. And then I just get like the end result for me is I just have a calendar appointment where it says like, here's the reservation time. So like, that's going to be such a cool thing. And when you kind of extrapolate that to, the ultimate impact, the TAM on this is enormous, right? Like, this is essentially all the business that's handled over the phone. That first layer is just going to be gone, in the next year or two. 10 years from now, it's going to be everywhere, right? Like, it's going to be everything we do. It'll be so natural to just think of it as like the AI decade, where AI is like embedded into everything. And, there's going to be a lot of cool games that we as normal people are going to see. No more, we're not going to wait on hold with, an airline trying to get a ticket fixed or something like that, right? Or, get a refund for something that went wrong. We'll basically be able to have our AI handle that for us, and then that AI will talk with another AI. It's going to be a really cool future where, a lot of the stress and hassle of dealing with resolving issues over the phone is just going to, evaporate, because it'll be so much more efficient.
Yeah, and AI also seems like it could be that missing component for the IoT space, right? To really take off as well. I see a really unique intersection there. I'm thinking folks have those sort of smart cameras, smart security systems they put in their house, right? The Ring doorbell where it rings your phone. Imagine someone's on your front stoop, and the AI goes, "Hey, like, I see you're on my property. Why are you here? You're being recorded. Oh, you're a delivery person? Okay, who are you delivering from? Thank you for the delivery." Or I think about my late grandmother. She had one of those systems where you could press a button and you would get
Right, right.
help or assistance. Imagine you have AI in there, where the AI is not just responsive, the AI is actually checking with your loved one throughout the day, seeing how they're doing, not just when they fall, not just sending a text when they fall, but maybe tracking their emotional well-being, not just doing their checking on their emotional well-being, but also notifying family members, hey, your loved one seems sad today. Hey, your loved one seems like they're struggling with making their meal today. So really having that constant communication with a loved one, for example.
And the cool thing about that is like, the fall detector, right? Where, if a loved one falls, you can mix that in with IoT. Like having a smartwatch, not only is it able to make that 911 call, it's also able to use the smartwatch to pull all of your vitals like immediately. Smartwatches can see like blood pressure, pulse rate. If you have one of those diabetic monitors, now you can send like glucose levels. You can do all of that. Like AI could do all of that in an emergency instantaneously. Like, hey, grandma fell, her blood pressure is low, her blood sugar level is low. Like that's such a cool use case.
Hey, thank you again, everybody, for tuning into the AI Hype podcast. We hope you enjoyed our episode, our high-level episode on voice AI and sort of that market. We're going to have a lot of deep dives into different companies and innovations in that space specifically. So stay tuned.